Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Israel Weekly. We have a great program lined up. I can feel it right now. And joining me this week, we have Yossi Livni, former ambassador to New Zealand, career foreign ministry person, expert in international diplomacy, and Dov Lipman, former member of Knesset from the Yesh Atid party, probably a future member of Knesset as well. Joining me, an expert in Israeli politics as well as diaspora affairs. Thank you for joining.
Good to be here.
Great. So we're going to start off with an exciting development. There seem to be rumblings here in the region of rumblings for peace, and it's not just Israel and the Palestinians, it's Israel and the general region. And yesterday, a very interesting meeting took place in the White House between Egyptian President Sisi and President Donald Trump. Sisi had sort of been banned from the White House for a number of years, had not been given the photo op. He not only got a photo op in the Oval Office, but he got backing from the United States president, partially because he fights terrorism and he's an ally of Israel. So is this changing things in the region? Let's take a look at that meeting yesterday.
We are very much behind Egypt and the people of Egypt, and the United States has, believe me, backing, and we have strong backing. We are very much, and as you and I will be soon talking, we are building up our military to a level that will be the highest, probably the highest that we've ever had. Plane orders, ship orders, aircraft carrier orders. We are rejuvenating our military to the highest level. I think in these times, probably more than ever before, or certainly almost more than ever before. That's what we need. And I just want to say to you, Mr. President, that you have a great friend and ally in the United States and in me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
فخامة الرئيس، منذ التقيت بك في سبتمبر الماضي ولقد رهنت عليك وإعجابي الشديد بشخصية الرئيس المتفردة، خاصة فيما يتعلق بمكافحة الإرهاب. هذا الفكر الشيطاني الخبيث الذي يقتل الأبرياء ويدمر الشعوب ويروع الأمنية. فخامة الرئيس، بكل قوة وبكل وضوح ستجدني أنا ومصر بجانبك في تنفيذ هذه الاستراتيجية لمواجهة الإرهاب والقضاء عليه.
Well, that certainly looks like the beginning of a good diplomatic relationship, and certainly a lot of people didn't think that President Donald Trump would be investing so much time and actually be able to do things here in the Middle East, but he seems very invested in it. So, Yossi, seasoned diplomat, ambassador, someone who's worked in the foreign ministry, what does this all mean for regional relations?
Well, I think that the fact that President Trump is embracing Egypt is an important step to reposition Egypt as a major player in the Middle East. We will have to see where it goes from here, because let's remember, this is the first official meeting for Trump as president with the president of Egypt. It will probably be a few days before we learn the nitty-gritty of what they talked about, but I think that if the idea is to push for a renewed effort towards retaking or reopening or launching the peace process, then I think it's an important step, taking into consideration the position that President Trump has taken with respect to Israel and the Palestinians. I think that we're in for some movement. I understand that an Arab newspaper published that there may be a regional conference in the works. We'll have to wait and see.
Now, there was a time where Egypt was really sort of the leader in the Arab world as a bridge to the West. It was at some point maybe taken over by Saudi Arabia. At some point, Turkey looked like it was going to take a major role. Do you think we're going to see the days of Egypt, the glory days of Egypt again?
I think that Egypt was always the #1 Arab country, or the #1 country in the Arab world. Turkey is not exactly an Arab country. So I think that Egypt is basically, with the welcome that President Sisi received in the White House, sends a signal that Egypt is back to where it used to be. As a major player, it's probably the most important player in the Arab world. Having said that, it doesn't mean that the Saudis don't have a role to play. They will probably have a role to play, but I don't think the Saudis tend to come out in front. They tend to play in the background and support what they consider positive initiatives. So we'll have to see.
Great. Dov, someone who's been in the Knesset and sort of been in a party which is neither left nor right, possibly in the center, but knows what goes on in each of these parties. How is something like this viewed politically in Israel among members of Knesset?
So there's a fascinating development that's taking place. Whereas when President Trump was elected, you felt this euphoria on the right side of the Knesset and real concern on the left side. All of a sudden, you're seeing it shift. And now all of a sudden, the euphoria on the right is slowly disappearing. And the left is saying, wait a minute here. We have somebody who might bring peace to the region. And certainly the video clip that we saw right now is being viewed in that way. Because I can guarantee you, the right wing of the Knesset does not see the embrace of President Sisi in a positive light. It's a positive light in general that, okay, there's some kind of friendship that's happening, but wait a minute. Let's go a step further, and this is where the analysis takes place. There's an upcoming meeting taking place with the King of Jordan. After that, President Abbas is coming. This is a 3-week period here where Donald Trump is opening the White House to many figures that will work together, and you're already seeing in Arab newspapers reports of demands of prisoner releases from Israel, moratorium on all settlement construction, and, as Yossi mentioned, a regional conference in the summer in the White House. These are all things which, for the right side of the Israeli political map, is disconcerting. The left side is leading towards some kind of positive vibes, and we have to see where it goes.
Now, between when Prime Minister Netanyahu met President Trump until this meeting between President Trump and al-Sisi, he sent his special envoy to the region, or his advisor, Jason Greenblatt, came both to Israel and then back again to Amman for the Arab League conference. He's been very active. How is that viewed, and what are people saying about that within the political structure?
So here's the interesting thing. Jason Greenblatt not only met with the Prime Minister of Israel in all the countries you mentioned, but he also met with Tzipi Livni. He also met with Naftali Bennett. He met with all the different figures in Israeli politics. For the Prime Minister, this is also disconcerting. What's going on over here? I'm the one that you speak to. What do you mean you're hearing all the voices in Israeli politics? There's no doubt that he went back to Washington with a report about things being much more complicated than people might have thought before. But here's where, again, President Trump, I want to make a deal. I want to make this happen. And people are very nervous on the Israeli right about where this is exactly going. We'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely shaking up the Israeli political scene as we try to figure out what direction this is going. And let's remember one more thing. Netanyahu, as prime minister, when he had someone who was unfriendly in the White House, so he could say no, he could put his foot down, we're not going in this direction, and we'll have this tension. Now when you have this red carpet rolled out for him, and the color guard, and all the friendship, can he say no? It'll be very difficult.
And he also met, Jason Greenblatt also met with regular Palestinians, rank and file Palestinians, not just leadership.
Correct.
So it does seem that he wants to really get involved and see what are the issues.
Get involved and understand and get a sense for what people are going through. And when you do that, you definitely realize, okay, we have a problem on our hands that we have to try to fix. And you can't always say Israel is correct, other side is wrong. There's a little bit of a gray area there, and that's where the president, as the deal maker, might come in and force Israel into measures which many in the Israeli right would not be very happy with.
Yossi, when we look at Egypt and this development, when specifically President Trump gives them backing, talks about fighting terror together, then al-Sisi talks about fighting terror and the evil that it does to communities, and then talks a whole laundry list of weapons and possible prizes that Egypt is going to get. How does that affect the relationship between Israel and Egypt, specifically with the Gaza Strip, dealing with the Palestinians there, as well as dealing with the Palestinians in the West Bank, where Egypt was at one point the people that put the Palestinians into place?
Look, I think that throughout history, basically, every time Arab countries went to Washington with a shopping list, Israeli leaders were not very excited about it. They always, talk about the need to maintain Israeli strategic supremacy. So I'm sure that this issue will be dealt with. It doesn't have to be dealt with publicly, but it will be discussed, I have no doubt. I want to go back to what Dov said. And if you remember yesterday at the press conference or the photo op, they spoke about we'll make a deal, and President Trump said, we will, and he said it with a lot of gusto. I'm sure that some people on the right side of the political map in Israel are not going to be very happy. But look, Egypt is an ally. Our relations with Egypt tend to be, ever since President Sisi came to power, have become closer. There is a congruence of positions insofar as terrorism is concerned. So I think that in that respect, I don't see a reason for concern. I think that working with Egypt, working with the United States, working with Jordan and others, and obviously, probably at some time in the future, decisions will have to be taken. Where do we go? We'll have to see.
Now, in your opinion, which country has the most influence on the Palestinians? Who are the Palestinians looking for if there would be a deal, if there would be something on the table? Who would they be?
Among the Arab countries, you mean?
Among the Arab countries, yeah.
That's a very good question. I don't know that there is one single country. They probably depend on Egypt and the Jordanians and the Saudis. Of course, Hamas, they're also Palestinians, and they will try to, to make deals with the more extremist elements in the Arab world. I don't know that Abbas will turn to the extremists, unless, of course, he's being challenged, and he will try to, if he thinks that this new initiative goes somewhere where he cannot deliver the goods or he doesn't like it, who knows? But on the whole, he will travel to the different Arab capitals like they always do and try to garner support and make sure that their view of how this, an eventual agreement should look like is being presented by the Arab countries, and that they will not give in to any demands or ideas put forward by President Trump or by Israel.
Okay, now,
If I can mention one more thing
Sure.
that's related to that. There's one factor here which we can't ignore, and that is President Trump's campaign promise, which helped him get elected: we will defeat ISIS, we will defeat radical Islamic terror. And that's the factor which we have to remember over here. If he has Arab countries that are willing to work together with him on that effort, he will turn to the Prime Minister of Israel and say, listen, I just need you to do X, Y, and Z so that I can move forward with this. And that's a factor which we cannot forget, which is a game changer in terms of the pressure that could be put on Israel to work together with all of these forces. And there's no doubt that's first and foremost in the president's mind at this time.
now, as long as I have you, with all this talk about a possible agreement and changes in the region, Palestinians, Egyptians, Jordanians, Arab League, is Netanyahu politically capable to bring a deal? There have been talk of elections. He's brought it up himself. There has also been talk of a national unity government. Is it Herzog? Is it Yair Lapid? Is it, I mean, if we're really talking about peace here, can he get some of the opposition parties together? What does he need to do?
Well, there's two factors. One factor is Naftali Bennett and the Biden UD party. The moment anything moves forward, if we have to be releasing prisoners, moratoriums, at a certain point, Naftali is going to have to, I think, politically stand up and say, I'm the leader of the Israeli right, no more, and pull out. At that moment, does the Prime Minister succeed in bringing labor into the government? I don't know. I can tell you as a Yesh Atid person, Yesh Atid will not be joining this government. The offer has been made before. That won't be happening. But could he try to do so? He might. But it's definitely going to be destabilizing in terms of the Israeli political system. That's one issue. But also within the Likud, we have to remember the Likud party itself is far to the right of the two states for two people, of the Bar Ilan speech of the Prime Minister, and therefore he might have to deal with a lot of challenges there as well. So yes, the moment things start moving on this front, you're talking about completely shaking up Israeli politics, including the possibility of heading towards elections over it.
And even setting up a government, we have the envoy who comes and meets with all the parties. Maybe they'll take a more active role. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, let's move on to the next topic for today. And we are talking about elections or possibility of elections or new people. And this past week, we've seen kind of two major forces come back into politics. One is Gabi Ashkenazi, who announced that he's sort of in a social party or a social movement. It's not clear what he's going to be doing with it, but getting Israelis together to kind of look at the problems. But he says he's not running at this point. So for us, that's less interesting. But back from retirement to semi-retirement, a philosophical retirement, if you will, is Gideon Sa'ar, who announced that he will be coming back to the Likud to support the Likud. He's been a critic of the prime minister in the past. It was rumored that he took a break from the Likud because Netanyahu was still in charge. And Gideon Sa'ar is someone who served as a cabinet secretary under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, became a member of Knesset, was Minister of the Interior, and is also married to one of the most well-known television personalities. So they make a power couple. They are well-known in Tel Aviv, and he's actually even got more interested in Judaism lately and reached out to the ultra-Orthodox, which is an interesting component that one would need if they were going to be prime minister. He said he's not going to challenge the prime minister, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as long as he's running. Let's take a look at what he said yesterday.
אני, כמו שאתם יודעים, לפני 2.5 החלטתי לקחת פסק זמן מהחיים הפוליטיים אחרי כמעט 20 שנה רצופות של שירות ציבורי. ואני באתי הערב כדי לומר לכם שתם פסק הזמן. ושאני חוזר לפעילות ציבורית ולפעילות פוליטית בתנועתנו, תנועת הליכוד. המטרה שלי לחזק את הליכוד לקראת אתגרי העתיד. המטרה שלי להבטיח שתנועת הליכוד, שהיא התנועה הלאומית המובילה בישראל, תוביל את המדינה גם בעתיד.
Well, we just heard him in his own words. First of all, it's good that he didn't give away any of his suits and ties, and he didn't gain too much weight, so he put it back on. And of course, you see the picture, the famous picture of Menachem Begin in the background that every Likud leader or potential leader or wannabe leader has. So let's go to you, Dov. You've worked with him in the Knesset. You've been with him as a minister. What can you tell us about Gideon Sa'ar?
Gideon Sa'ar is a well-liked, well thought out, wonderful, wonderful politician and leader. People in the Knesset from all perspectives respect him. He's clean in terms of any issues of corruption. You're able to get along with him and work together with him. He's able to reach out to people who are not his natural allies. He's a real player. And I should say, on the political map, he's more to the right of Prime Minister Netanyahu within the Likud. And therefore, this actually relates a little bit to what we were talking about before. Because if, in Gideon Sa'ar's eyes, we might go to elections over possibly the issue of the Prime Minister making too many accommodations or concessions on the Palestinian issue, and then all of a sudden the Likud looks for their savior, and here's this popular personality. It's a natural for them to turn to him. The reaction within the Likud and the Knesset shows just how much of a threat. The coalition chairman, David Bitan, came out and started saying immediately, if anybody dares to try to attack or challenge the Prime Minister, there will be ramifications, there'll be consequences. They're scared, they're nervous, there's a shakeup within the Likud. People aren't going to be sure which way to go. Again, he didn't say he's challenging the Prime Minister, but this is a major announcement. I'll even say, to see the chairman of our party, Yair Lapid, and the opposition come out and say, we welcome the return of a person like this. He is the kind of person who people can see as a leader for Israel and a leader that we can be proud of, even if we disagree with him ideologically. And therefore, it is major news, and it's good news for the state of Israel after it's all said and done.
Just to get things on the table, I also worked with him. Positive things to say, but that's not, what you said is very correct. A lot of people feel that. Yossi, how do people, as someone who's served in foreign embassies in New Zealand and Mexico and other places, dealt with diplomats coming into Israel, when they see all this kind of shakeup going on, Netanyahu calling the possibility of elections over some kind of, national broadcasting company, threatening people coming in, throwing their hat in the ring when there's no elections, how do they look at that in foreign capitals?
Look, most diplomats in most countries, this is their bread and butter issues. this is what they do. They report on developments in the countries where they're posted. So I'm quite certain that diplomats in Israel send lengthy reports. I doubt very much whether anyone will try to risk a forecast or a prediction what's going to happen, but they follow it very closely. I know that every time a political crisis happens in Israel, colleagues from other embassies or from the foreign ministries where I was posted always called and said, can you have time for lunch and, you know, try to understand what's behind all of this. And I have no doubt that in many capitals, my former colleagues are being asked, because there is an interest. Israel is a major player in the Middle East. After all, we're 50% of the conflict here. And people want to know where Israel is heading, and I think they try to understand what is going on. So, yeah, this is what you do. You ask people, you try to get them to understand the realities of Israeli democracy. In other countries, in some countries, people don't understand how it works, but you do your best.
Okay. Are people getting ready for elections, you think? From what you hear, I mean, you're in a party, there are some parties where the leader decides who's going to be on the list. There are some parties that have internal primaries. I mean, I would think that members of Knesset are always running.
Yeah, so no parties are at the point of developing their lists, but I can tell you, over the last 2 weeks, the Likud MKs were running around from one event to another. Now, granted, some of that is Passover, and that's a part of the nature. But if you listen to the words that they're saying, no one is saying that elections are on the immediate horizon, but they're going to come at some point in the relatively near future. And the reason for that is you have a coalition which has 4 heads of parties that can't get along with each other ideologically or politically. They despise each other, and they view each other as competition. And at a certain point, that falls apart. So it's not going to happen in the immediate future, but everyone knows that it's on the way, and you do see parties preparing themselves in terms of when will primaries be, when will leadership primaries be, and other things that are happening in order to be prepared for when that time comes.
And does that change, meaning all this talk of elections, the actual governing, the actual work in the Knesset, legislation, things have to get done. How does it affect it when you have all these things going on?
This is one of the problems that we have in the Israeli political system, is the lack of stability, so that no minister can say, okay, I have 4 years now to plan out what I'm going to do. Every minister has to think 2 years, and I have to come with something to show the people, and that impacts long-term planning and really impacting the country in the right way. It impacts legislation in a real way. People are thinking about, how do I fast-track things that I want to get in before? And when you fast-track something, it's not done in the right way with all of the exploratory work and with all the bringing people together. So having been in the Knesset during a time when the government was falling apart and people weren't sure what's going to happen, it does one of 2 things. Either people say, I'm going to stop my legislative work and focus on the political side, or people try to speed things up, and either way, it's not so good for the country.
And just to pick up on what you said, Yisrael Katz, the Minister of Transportation, just celebrated 8 years in his position, which is probably one of the records.
And if you look in the area of transportation, that is an area where you actually do see Israel and infrastructure, really positive things happening, because you had one person with his staff trying to carry that out, given the fact that he had to go through a few elections, but there's still some level of stability, and you can actually see real change in the country because of that.
And he's also named as a possible contender against Netanyahu, whether, again, not challenging Netanyahu, but saying he's there for afterwards. So I want to thank both of my guests, Dov Lippman and Yossi Livnei. Thank you very much for joining us. That is all the time we have today. I'm Mitchell Barak, sitting in for Steve Leibowitz, who is traveling all over the world, and hopefully he'll send us a postcard by next week. Thank you very much for watching Israel Weekly. You can follow us on the internet, iltv.tv, on Facebook, on YouTube, or on many of the satellite and television stations that are carrying this program and the regular daily news show. Thank you so much for joining us.